So the
Here we come, June 23rd.
We don't have to do more tests. He said it doesn't support.
Nightly News with Lester Holt.
Good evening, I'm Savannah Guthrie in for Lester, and tonight the stark warning from the nation's top infectious disease doctor coming before Congress. Dr. Anthony Fauci said today we're seeing a disturbing surge of infections, and the next 2 weeks will be critical. Cases of COVID-19 are on the rise in almost half the states now, with record surges in Florida, Texas, and Arizona, where the president visited this afternoon. We have our team covering all angles tonight, and we'll begin with NBC's Tom Costello in Washington.
With long lines for testing and COVID-19 cases surging once again in the South and the West, the nation's top coronavirus experts today warned Congress the pandemic remains a very real threat.
We're now seeing a disturbing surge of infections.
Nationwide, 23 states are reporting an increase in cases of 25% or more over the last 2 weeks, with increases of 100% or more in Hawaii, Oklahoma, Montana, Florida, Arizona, South Carolina, Wyoming, and Oregon. Experts believe it could be linked to the Memorial Day weekend when millions of Americans chose to leave home and socialize in large groups.
The next couple of weeks are going to be critical in our ability to address those surgings that we're seeing.
The stats today, 2.3 million confirmed cases across the country, 120,000 deaths and climbing by 500 to 1,000 each day. Experts warn of a potentially horrifying death toll to come, the possibility of 200,000 deaths by the fall.
We have large parts of the country that believe that somehow the pandemic is over and that we're done with the pandemic. That is going to get us into a lot of trouble. We are not done with this pandemic.
14 states plus D.C. have shown a drop in cases of 25% or more over the last 2 weeks. Today's hearing comes just 3 days after President Trump said a decrease in testing would slow the number of cases.
So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please.
The White House said the president was kidding, but today Mr. Trump said he was serious. His top doctors, though, insist nothing's changed.
I know for sure, but to my knowledge, none of us have ever been told to slow down on testing. We're going to be doing more testing, not less.
All of us have been and continue to be committed to increasing readily, timely access to testing.
The good news, the first potential vaccine enters phase 3 clinical testing next month. Fauci is optimistic about a vaccine by year's end.
I still think there is a reasonably good chance that by the very beginning of 2021, that if we're going to have a vaccine, that we will have it by then.
When will schools be able to open? The top docs today said that's up to each individual state and school district. One size does not fit all for schools or universities. Meanwhile, a plea to young people to think about those at risk and avoid large crowds.
Plan A, don't go in a crowd. Plan B, if you do, make sure you wear a mask.
The concern tonight, weeks after a surge, the death rate typically goes up. Tom Costello, NBC News, Washington.
I'm Morgan Chesky in Texas, where tonight a surge in COVID-19 is raising fears as the state reopens.
We are moving very fast in the wrong direction.
The next couple of weeks are going to be critical in our ability to address those surgings that we're seeing in Florida, in Texas, in Arizona, and in other states.
A new daily high in Texas. Cases topping 5,000 for the first time.
Because the spread is so rampant right now, there's never a reason for you to have to leave your home.
Hospitalizations also spiking, up 177% in the last 3 weeks in Harris County. More than a third of all cases in California have come in just the past 2 weeks. Arizona announcing another daily high, nearly 3,600 new cases added on Tuesday. Florida not far behind.
We're really in a worse place now than we were before.
25 states trending in the wrong direction over the past week. Nearly the entire western half of the country.
We've all done the best that we can do to tackle this virus. And the reality, it brought this nation to its knees.
More cities now mandating face coverings, but enforcing those rules.
They're heavily infected with COVID. Did you ever notice? I said the other night, did anybody see my speech the other night on Saturday night? What I said the other night, there's never been anything where they have so many names. I could give you 19 or 20 names for that, right? It's got all different names. Wuhan. Wuhan was catching on. Coronavirus, right? Kung flu, yeah. Kung flu. COVID-19, COVID. I say, what's the 19? COVID-19. Some people can't explain what the 19. Give me the COVID-19. I said, that's an odd name. I could give you many, many names. Some people call it the Chinese flu, the China flu, right? They call it the China as opposed to China, the China. I've never seen anything like it, but here's the story. We are going to be stronger than ever before, and it's going to be soon.
While he was on stage. The first is that he's trying to use these scare tactics to say that Democrats are socialists, that they want America not to be America anymore, that they're really anarchists who are all about kind of dismantling the entire legacy of America, despite the fact that, of course, there are protesters who are saying actually America should be getting better rather than thinking about the Confederate soldiers that fought to break this country up. We should be thinking about how to better treat every man and every woman equally. The second thing that the president is doing is really making the case that this virus, that he has it under control, talking about the fact that the economy is just going to get better if it's just around the corner. He's talking about the fact that if given 4 more years, he will be able to really bring economic prosperity to the country. But there's an issue there. The issue there is that Dr. Anthony Fauci and so many other health officials are saying that America does not have the virus under control. Dr. Anthony Fauci told Congress just today people should be bracing for a second wave of this coronavirus, and that we're seeing historic surges in places like Arizona, but in other states as well. So I think while the president is trying to make this case that he is not only having everything under control, but that he's the best person for the job, you have Joe Biden and as well as health officials saying, look, President Trump is not taking this seriously enough, and he's really talking about things in a way that just is not conforming with what the reality of the situation is.
Let me bring Jacob Soboroff in, because the president has that event that's going on right now. He was where you are earlier, touring the border. Of course, 2016, it was the idea of building the wall along the U.S.-Mexico border, the entirety of it. That was a major part of his campaign. Tell us what was happening there today. What was he trying to showcase? What
FBI says tonight it is confident no crime was committed in connection with a noose found in the garage used by NASCAR star Bubba Wallace. NBC's Pete Williams joins us now. Pete, what have we found out?
Well, the FBI and the Justice Department now say it does not appear that anybody intended to express hatred for Bubba Wallace. The discovery of a noose in his NASCAR garage touched off a huge and emotional show of support for him at the track in Alabama. But now the FBI says the noose had actually been there for at least 6 months, since last October, and that Wallace was only assigned that specific garage last week. Investigators determined nobody could have known he would be assigned to that garage. Conclusion, no evidence of any federal crime. NASCAR says it was a garage door pull rope fashioned like a noose, and says it's grateful to learn that this was not an intentional or racist act. Savannah.
All right, Pete Williams with the update. Thank you. A growing battle in this country tonight over the removal of monuments viewed by some as symbols of racism, with the president now weighing in. NBC's Garrett Hake with our report.
Police in Washington this morning using pepper spray and batons to clear protesters from the streets around Lafayette Park, where last night federal officers and an even larger group of demonstrators clashed.
Without any warnings, they came and started beating people, maliciously with batons.
Protesters tying ropes around the statue of Andrew Jackson, trying and failing to topple the bronze monument to the nation's 7th president.
Andrew Jackson was a slave owner. He was the opposite of sensitive to African Americans, and he committed terrible atrocities and violence against Native Americans in this country.
The incident drawing the attention of President Trump, who said he would use a 2003 law to arrest and pursue harsh sentences for those caught damaging or destroying statues of veterans on federal property.
They're bad people. They don't love our country, and they're not taking down our monuments.
But across the country, in the wake of the killing of George Floyd, statues and monuments deemed racist by some are coming down by force or by government order. Demonstrators this week tearing down monuments to Confederate figures in Raleigh and a statue of Union General and President Ulysses S. Grant, the man who defeated the Confederacy, in San Francisco. In New York City, the Museum of Natural History says it will take down a statue of Teddy Roosevelt in the face of growing criticism over its depiction of Black and Native American figures beneath the former president.
These are monuments that don't represent for the people, it's representation of oppression.
DC police are out in force. The protesters pushed back a full block from the Jackson statue and the White House. Police determined to avoid a repeat of the chaos we saw here last night. Savannah?
Garrett, thank you. And in Atlanta today, a farewell to Rayshard Brooks, 11 days after he was shot and killed by Atlanta police. The messages at his funeral resonating far behind the church where he was remembered today. Here's NBC's Blaine Alexander.
Dressed in white, the family of Rayshard Brooks filed into Atlanta's historic Ebenezer Baptist Church. A soulful but somber goodbye for the 27-year-old killed by a police officer. The service, at times, focusing not on his death, but his life as a father of four.
I look at my grandbaby right there, she looks just like him. And when I look at her, I know that he's not gone.
In the church once pastored by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., today his daughter spoke directly to Brooks' children.
I know the pain of growing up without a father and the ongoing attention around his tragic loss.
Today's service capped at 200 family and friends by invitation only. And outside, more mourners at a funeral celebrating Brooks' life while protesting his death.
What do you do to stay alive? Comply like George Floyd or run like Rayshard Brooks? I'm not asking for a friend, I'm asking for myself and my nieces and my nephews and my children.
King focusing on the date Brooks died, June 12th, the same day civil rights leader Medgar Evers was killed in 1963, the day Nelson Mandela was sentenced to prison.
So June 12th is now a constant reminder of the struggle for justice.
Today, a rallying cry for peace.
Let my Uncle Dolph make us better people no matter the race. Let's treat each other how we want to be treated as people.
And a message for those protesting.
We gotta keep on walking together and marching together and standing together, and together we will win.
Blaine Alexander, NBC News, Atlanta.
In 60 seconds, one of the world's top tennis superstars testing positive for COVID-19 after...
Keep me asleep.
Absolutely. It senses your movement.
This is caliphate, and when I took over, that caliphate was going like this. It was a mess, but we destroyed it. No administration has accomplished more in just 3.5 years. It is. I mean, I could go after, these are just a few points. I could talk for an hour and a half just reading the points off. You know that. Yet, as you know, in recent months, America has faced down that unseen enemy, the virus from the distant land that spread across the globe and invaded our shores, but invaded the shores of, think of it, 188 nations. I have a friend, he's a very smart guy, said, I didn't know there were that many nations. I said, actually go over 200, but 188 nations that we know of. I love you too. Thank you, darling. Thank you. And tomorrow the fake news will be said, he said he loves somebody. He said he loves somebody. Terrible. Terrible. I'll be in big trouble, the fake news. They are terrible people. Who are the people that stood up? I just want to stand up, please. Who said I love you? Let's... Whoa! Sit down fast, please. Don't let them see you. That's a lot of press back there. Look at that. That's the problem. They cover all these speeches. You know, I never have a speech done. I never have a speech where it's not like live television. You know, sometimes you'll have one where you can actually speak and you don't have to worry about like one little slip. One tiny little slip, one word. You could say 10 speeches, one little word, they'll say, he's lost it. No, You know who's lost it? Sleepy Joe has lost it. In response, we took swift and early action to ban travel from China very, very early. Remember Nancy Pelosi?
Had hepatitis B or C, have flu-like symptoms, or...
Thank you.
Long after I banned China from coming here.
The Equality Act would also amend the Civil Rights Act of 1964 to prohibit discrimination in public places and services and federally funded programs on the basis of sex, including sexual orientation.
Through the evening, a beautiful night, clear to partly cloudy here by 10.
Looks like a dry weekend, mostly sunny. 92 Saturday, 97 on Sunday. Some storms coming in early. Heat breeze makes sleep.
Reporter inside that I've been talking to says there is absolutely no social distancing in there, and there is a minimal amount of mask wearing. Obviously, this mass gathering goes against CDC guidelines. The mayor's statement today also said there really is no safe way to hold a rally like this in this pandemic.
And Stephanie, one other thing, we know all this takes place at a moment, a time of widespread public protests over racial injustice, including protests there in Phoenix. What are some of the president's supporters telling you about all that?
You know, we did speak to at least one person who was sympathetic to the death of George Floyd. But overall, what we heard is a focus on those isolated incidents of rioting and looting, including at the Scottsdale Mall that happened here a few weeks ago, as opposed to thinking or talking about the legitimate grievances of the Black Lives Matter. And here is how one Trump supporter we spoke to earlier framed the issue.
It's divided. I don't think it's Donald Trump's fault. I think it's the left. They're definitely pushing narratives that it's always been police brutality. You know, it's nothing new. And I think that black people kill black people more often than that anyway. I think that's our least of our concerns.
That is a common refrain from people who oppose or don't support the Black Lives Matter movement, Judy, as a way to detract from real incidents of police brutality. I will say that earlier today I spoke to a white family that had come out here as sort of a mini counter-protest, and they were holding small signs that said Black Lives Matter. Their children were holding those signs. And when I asked them about their political persuasion, they said simply, we're Christians. And on that point of protesters, we're not seeing them right here in the vicinity of Dream City Church, but we do know on the perimeter there are several protesters, anti-Trump protesters, that have shown up.
All right, Stephanie.
We want to do testing. We want to do everything, but they use it to make us look bad. But because of it, our mortality rate is so low. It's so great what's happened. So we want to test. So we do all these tests, and we find pockets, and we find people, and we find cases, and they say, the cases have jumped. Instead of saying, what a job we're doing with testing. But we did the job with testing, and we did ventilators, and we came up with tests that we have so many different types of tests. We have the 5-minute test, the 10-minute test. We have tests, you send them to a public lab, a private lab. We have tests. It's a lot of tests. And other countries that have done very well with testing, they call us, they say, there's nobody that's been able to do the job that you've done. Now, the only ones I can't get to say that are the fake news media people. They can't say that. Someday it'll be recognized by history. Someday. But our actions and your selfless sacrifice, and that's what it was, saved hundreds of thousands of lives. We had to do it. And we did the right thing, and I'll tell you what, we did the right thing. Now we opened, we got to get it open because, you know, I said, we got to get it open. People need it. You know, people get sick from the other also. It's not just from the virus. They get sick from all of the other things that happen. You know what I mean? We cut through red tape to accelerate breakthrough therapies and vaccines. We're going to have a vaccine very soon. We distributed 1.5 billion pieces of personal protective equipment. We unleashed the medical and logistical power of the United States military, and thanks to our efforts, not a single American who needed a ventilator has been denied a ventilator. That's impossible. That's impossible.
Now, there are certain groups that are more at risk, and the reason I'll bring this up isn't because in Arizona it's particularly important, where we have a lot of retirees and a lot of snowbirds. People in Arizona who are 65 and above have, and if they have COVID, have a 58 times more likely chance of dying from it than somebody who's 45 or under. 58 times more likely. So as Dr. Gupta mentioned earlier, even if you think you're young and healthy and immune, for one, it's not exactly a good assessment, because I'm seeing young, healthy patients who are coming in very sick. But two, they can spread it to people who are at risk, whether immunocompromised or elderly, or a plethora of patients. And we have a lot of those elderly patients here in Arizona. It's really concerning. I'm seeing all of them. And then obviously the older ones are even more likely to die, which is really, really upsetting.
So the president, is holding the rally in this church where he's got thousands of people. And, the leaders of the church, the president said in an interview the leaders of the church said in a video on Facebook yesterday that they had a unique air filtration system, that would kill, they said, 99.9% of COVID within 10 minutes. So when you come in our auditorium, 99% of COVID is gone, killed, if it was there in the first place. You can know when you come here, you'll be safe. They did pull that video down. The company that does the HVAC says that they have never heard of such a thing. But what do you make of that? These are the leaders of this institution telling people it's 99.9% safe.
Yeah, that's upsetting on so many levels. As a physician, as a researcher, as somebody who's gone to the company's website where it did say 99.9 but didn't have any research to back it up. Remember, they used a surrogate measure. They didn't actually use COVID in patients. They would need a big patient population to be able to prove that. They never have. And even if it were 99.9% effective, nothing about filtration is novel, first of all. Okay, we've been filtering air for years. But even if it were that effective, the only way it would work is if I'm standing 100 feet from you. And then if I cough or laugh, hopefully the filtration system picks it up between the 100 feet between me and you. But that rally is not a separation of 100 feet. It's not even 6 feet. So if somebody laughs and has COVID, the person next to him who catches that laugh now is sick. There's no way for this filtration system to magically, like Star Wars, zap it out.
No, they're not even 1 foot away, and we could hear them chanting. They are using their respiratory systems. Thank you very much.
Definitely
again.
To those little moments, here's to American Drop.
Bill.
This is going to differ from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, perhaps even on a family-by-family level. But what is the case is that as this goes on, as we learn more about this virus, hopefully we can deploy and use that information so we can help people make educated decisions about whether they want to go back into the workplace, whether they want to resume a more normal situation or not. Because
it's amazing how many categories. Young people without a high school diploma, young people without a college diploma. We were #1 on every list you can think of. Women, 75 years. Not as good, I'm sorry. But it was getting ready to hit the all-time. Women, it was the best in 75 years, so I have to apologize. Can you believe that? We did the best in 75 years, and I apologize to women. But we were ready to hit the all-time, and then we got hit by something that should have never happened because they could have stopped it. Young people have seen their wages rise by more than 10%. They've never seen anything like that. We built the strongest and most prosperous economy in the history of the world, and we will do it again very, very quickly. It's happening already. We've just added 2.5 million jobs last month. Think of that. That's the largest increase in the history of our country. 2.5 million.
Austin, examining issues of race, society, and American politics. W. Fitzhugh Brundage is a professor of history at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And Ariel Hudson was one of 6 students who petitioned the University of Mississippi to relocate a Confederate statue on campus. And we welcome all of you to the News Hour. Thank you so much for joining us. Ariel Hudson, to you first, why was it so important to you and the others to get this statue, this monument down?
It was important because of the rich racial history at the University of Mississippi, and I think because of its close ties to the Confederacy specifically. During that time, most of its enrolled students actually fought in the war on the Confederate side. So the University of Mississippi's history is not new in terms of the white supremacy and the oppression that it has played now. And so once it came to, there are a lot of things that actually unfolded as far as us deciding that we wanted to write a resolution to get the statue relocated. But I think the main issue came when students actually started to become more vocal about the symbols that we were seeing on our campus and what that meant to African American students and how that could potentially affect African American enrollment and the retention of African American students. And we knew that those symbols had to come down.
Fitzhugh Brundage.
The same left-wing ideologues who oppose school choice, who support deadly sanctuary cities, who want to defund our police, defund and abolish our police. Think of it, defund and abolish is now their theme. And who preside over the violence and mayhem of the 20 most dangerous cities in America, 20 for 20, 20 most dangerous, run by Democrats. And it'll happen to our country if a guy like Joe Biden gets in, because Joe Biden has no control over what's happening. They won't even be talking to him. The murder rate in Detroit and Baltimore is higher than that of El Salvador, Guatemala, or Afghanistan. But the left launches no protests over these travesties. They're travesties because it doesn't serve their radical agenda. Think of that. Tougher than Afghanistan. All run by Democrats. While their movement is based on hate, ours is based on love. Love of our family, love of our nation, and love of our fellow citizens. We embrace the noble vision of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. and believe that people should not be judged based on the color of their skin, but the content of their character. This is a choice of two futures. The left's vision of disunity and discord, or our vision of equal opportunity and equal justice. Every American should take a long look at the bedlam in Seattle, because that's exactly what will come to every city near you, every suburb and community in America, if the radical left Democrats are put.
There was a statue next to him of a black man, an African man symbolizing the continent of Africa. That's coming down. Last night in Washington, protesters tried to take down a statue of Andrew Jackson. How do you think about what should be standing and what should come down? How do you think about drawing that line?
I think that they should come down. I think it was only a matter of time before those monuments that are dedicated to our founding fathers also came into the conversation of what monuments will stand, how their legacies will continue to be recognized, because the fact is that the very foundation of America was founded on slavery and the oppression of people who were not of European descent. I think that this is a conversation that is long overdue for our nation. I'm glad that we are finally addressing, monuments and statues that are not just Confederate monuments, that they are the monuments and statues and the legacies of people who embrace, even as presidents, the ideal of white supremacy and the oppression of black labor and black people and indigenous people.
And
Democrats are also trying to rig the election by sending out tens of millions of mail-in ballots using the China virus as the excuse for allowing people not to go to the polls.
The plans for hosting next year's event are already in the works.
We're starting ahead of the game already. We have people that have committed, entertainers and artists and authors that have committed to next year's show.
In Aberdeen, Ryan Martin, Dakota News Now.
Switching gears here to our first alert forecast. Phil, another pretty nice evening, just a little cooler out there.
It is, and so if you're going to be outside here this evening later on, especially, you might need a jacket or a sweatshirt, something like that, but otherwise it's going to be nice and quiet outside. Open the windows and some fresh air in, give the air conditioner a break. Let's take a look at some of our sky cams. Hardly a cloud inside at all in Pier. The clouds are diminishing in Aberdeen, in Yankton, and Sioux Falls as well. Everyone's going to have basically a clear sky here later on this evening, so still a few clouds holding on in Mitchell and Marshall, Minnesota as well, but not much longer. Here, so let's take a look at our evening planner in Sioux Falls. A few clouds around right now, 77. Clear to partly cloudy later on this evening with temps in the low to mid 60s. Meanwhile, in Aberdeen, you have, again, some of those cumulus clouds out there. It's calm, 74 to 8. And just a few clouds hanging on. Mainly clear, though, later on tonight after sunset. And in Pier, mainly sunny right now. We'll keep it that way at 8 o'clock. Clear and calm later on this evening with temperatures in the 60s.
All right, thank you, Phil.
You bet.
Developing here on Dakota News Now, the family of a missing woman says her body was...
Leaves behind 3 daughters, 8, 2, and 1, and then you have a stepson that he had. A lot of people were focused on the young people and what they really felt moving forward. It was a tough day, especially inside that church. Aaron?
All right, Ryan, thank you. And next I want to go to Reverend RAPHAEL Warnock, the senior pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church. You just heard him in Ryan's piece delivering the eulogy. And Reverend, I appreciate your time. I mean, watching you today, you've said that you have had to give these kinds of speeches far too often, and yet you then said you haven't lost hope. How come?
Oh, we can't afford to lose hope. We have to keep fighting the good fight. And although it is a dark and difficult moment, I think that there are good reasons to have hope. And I'm inspired by the young people that Ryan and others reference. We are seeing an amazing coalition of conscience marching out onto American streets, demanding that our country do better and that it rises up to its high idealism. And I'm encouraged. I think that we will continue to see this kind of activism throughout the summer. And I'm hopeful then that it will translate into voting in November. That is a sure way of pushing forward meaningful change.
As you know, a lot of people have tried to understand what happened there, and no one truly does yet. One thing we keep hearing about is that this had been peaceful for almost a half an hour, right? Everybody had, the officers and Mr. Brooks, and then suddenly Mr. Brooks runs away from police. And in your eulogy, you said you understood why. Here is part of how you explained it.
If your skin is the weapon, and your complexion is the crime, what do you do to stay alive? Comply like George Floyd or run like Rayshard Brooks? I'm not asking for a friend, I'm asking for myself.
It's deeply personal for you.
It is. I grew up in public housing down in Savannah, Georgia, and I spend a lot of time now as a pastor in the community and just moving around as an African-American man myself. I know what it's like to be marched through a grocery store as a teenager, accused of shoplifting, simply because I had my hands in my pocket. It was a chilly day and marched through the grocery store and then released without an apology. I know that pain and that humiliation. And we're seeing these kinds of things show up in everyday, this is a part of everyday African-American life, but in recent days, we're seeing a public conversation about it across races, and I think that's important.
So, you talk about the protesters and your hopes that this will continue through the summer and there will be real change. The president came out today with retweeting a video appearing to show a black man harassing a white man. And his comment was, quote, "Look what's going on here. Where are the protesters?" He then retweeted another account linking to a clip of a black man pushing a white woman into the side of a subway car, asking, quote, "Where are the protests for this?" What do you say to the president and to those images, Reverend?
He is a divider in chief. He is engaged in the politics of division because he has no vision. And what we have to do is we have to rise above those who engage in looting and those who tweet about shooting, as the president did a few weeks ago. He hasn't been helpful, and I've long lost any expectation that he would be helpful. The truth is, we've been dealing with these issues before Donald Trump was president. We as a nation have got to look deeply inward. This is an inflection point. I think some issues are coming to the surface that have always been there. But thanks to cell phones and cameras everywhere, people are beginning to see it. And I'm encouraged by the response that we're seeing in the streets and also at the ballot box. Last Tuesday, we saw an amazing turnout in the Georgia primary that surpassed 2016. I think there's a lot of passion out there and commitment. And the more people participate, the healthier our democracy.
Well, Reverend, I appreciate your time, and I thank you very much. And as you mentioned, the ballot box, it is election night now in 2 key states, and these are really big races to watch. There could be big upsets in both. We're going to talk about that after a break. And former President...
And listen, I'm going to keep this short and sweet. I just want to say that conservative censorship on campus is real, and it's happening all across the country all the time. This past year...
First, I just want to say thank you to Mr. President for having me on stage today. So, if you didn't know much about Minnesota about a month ago, I'm sure you've seen us in the headlines over the past few weeks. The DFL is successfully moving our state farther to the left more and more each day. Now, that isn't because people aren't conservative in Minnesota. It's because they're hell-bent on demonizing us at every turn. I began my career working in politics with Turning Point USA. Unfortunately, due to the leftist culture of my campus at North Hennepin, we were shut down almost immediately and were refused official recognition. I was told by the faculty that political groups were not welcome on campus. However, they had multiple leftist groups that supported the Black Lives Matter movement, they were pro-abortion, and they advocated for Bernie Sanders. I know. Our governor, the mayor of Minneapolis, and the representative of the 5th Congressional District in Minnesota are all Democrats. But for whatever reason, the Republicans and the president take the blame for what has taken place. Unfortunately, the murder of George Floyd has created absolute chaos in my state of Minnesota. They have, sorry, I lost my place. Ever since the murder of George Floyd, I have not seen as much division, deceit, and destruction in my life. Black Lives Matter only makes a scene during election years. How convenient that they made the biggest scene of all during the year of the most important election of our time. Black Lives Matter is only about police brutality once every 4 years. In between, they're heavily funding a push for leftist and LGBTQ+ agendas. The Black community's culture is naturally very conservative, so they mask their hidden agendas and play on the community's biggest fear. Black Lives Matter truly cared about black lives, they would not have allowed the riots to destroy black businesses and black communities. If they cared about black lives, they would defund Planned Parenthood. If Black Lives Matter cared about black lives, they would address the astronomically high numbers of black-on-black crime in inner cities. They try to paint us as the bad guys for not supporting the organization, but it's not the saying Black Lives Matter. I think there's very few conservatives that believe black lives don't matter. We do believe Black Lives Matter. We just believe they all matter, not just the lives the left chooses to exploit. I am the field director for Ilhan Omar's challenger, Lacey Johnson. He is the first Republican in Minnesota to have Black Lives Matter activists and lifelong Democrats want to hear what he has to say. Because of that, they've tried to silence us at every turn. People are fed up and they're getting nervous. They will stop at nothing to keep their hold on us, even if that means lying to the very people they're supposed to represent. Mr. President, I just want to say thank you for being a great example of a big tent Republican. The president has never needed the black vote to win, but he has still done incredible work with prison reform, lowering black unemployment, funding HBCUs, and stimulating the black community with opportunity zones. All without pandering. Once upon a time, the president asked the black community what we had to lose. We didn't have anything, but now we do. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Nia. Well, Nia, I want to just tell you, first of all, thank you very much. And so heartfelt, I could see that. And I also issued a historical executive order defending free speech, and all of this is on college campuses. And I will tell you that it's something that's being used by people like Charlie and used very well, and it's opening up a whole new voice. And it's my honor to have done it under my order. Any college that refuses to let you speak stands to lose billions of dollars in terms of the overall system.
Won Arizona once since 1950. It is in play. That is why Donald Trump today is in Arizona. Why is he campaigning there? Because he's in trouble. And that's the point when Joe Biden won those primaries. And I said on your show many times, I'm looking for a Democrat who can expand the electorate. Joe Biden has done that. And he's going to be able to reach out to independents, to reasonable Republicans, to motivate the Democrats.
Karen Bass, Congresswoman Val Demings, and Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. Viewers will have the chance to participate in the town hall. You can go to msnbc.com/townhall to submit a question for that event on Friday night. And that's going to do it for me. Don't go anywhere. All In with Chris Hayes starts right now.
Roosevelt, that statue has stood on Central Park for 80 years. Antifa demanded its removal, so Mayor Bill de Blasio complied, and he's taking it down. Few people ever could have imagined that Teddy Roosevelt would be canceled. Roosevelt was the most popular president in American history. He was also a war hero, an historian, a naturalist, a rancher, a chief of police, an author, conservationist, as well as the father of 6. At one point in Roosevelt's extraordinarily busy life, he was also the governor of New York. This morning, the current governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, weighed in on his removal.
People are making a statement.
about equality, about community, to be against racism, against slavery. I think those are good statements, and it depends, can you overdo it? Of course you can. But in New York, I don't think we've overdone it, and I think it's a healthy expression of people saying, let's get some priorities here, and let's remember the sin and mistake that this nation made, and let's not celebrate it.
Were you listening carefully to that? In the state of New York, the governor tells us, we haven't overdone it. Destroying public property is, quote, a healthy expression of people saying, let's get some priorities here. Okay. So that's the standard set forth by a Democratic Party leader. Let's think it through for a minute. Andrew Cuomo lives in the governor's mansion in Albany. Teddy Roosevelt once lived there too. So did Governors Grover Cleveland and Franklin Roosevelt. By current standards, both Cleveland and
between the EU and the US since the pandemic began. The United States, we're the green line. The United States not only has not gotten the virus under control, it's now backsliding toward 30,000 new cases a day. The white line, that's the European Union. In the fantasy world, meantime, the president goes straight into the middle of one of the hardest hit states, not to visit patients or doctors or nurses or EMTs. Instead, he first visits the border wall, then goes to get a dose of self-gratification, his own favorite medicine, other than hydroxychloroquine, at a megachurch, where the pastors promise a miracle device will keep folks safe. And in this house of God, he again uses a racist slur to describe the virus.
I have so many names. I could give you 19 or 20 names for that, right? It's got all different names. Wuhan. Wuhan was catching on. Coronavirus, right? Kung flu, yeah. Kung flu. COVID-19, COVID. I say, what's the 19? COVID-19, some people can't explain what the 19. Give me the COVID-19. I said, that's an odd name.
Meantime, back in the real world, Dr. Fauci and other members of the once visible coronavirus task force that has now become invisible, they're like the coronavirus, they're invisible, told lawmakers it's been weeks since they've spoken to the president.
Dr. Fauci, when is the last time you spoke to the president?
About 2.5 weeks ago.
Admiral Shawal, when is the last time you spoke to the president?
It was about 2.5 weeks ago as well, maybe 3 weeks ago.
Honorable Han, when is the last time you spoke to the president about the pandemic's response and the response?
It's been some time since I spoke about the pandemic response.
CDC Director Robert Redfield, who you saw there not saying anything, he declined to answer that question. When was the last time you saw the president? It really does make you wonder, though. I mean, it was pretty clear Trump didn't like him, even when the task force was having daily briefings. He didn't get a lot of chances to talk. He usually just kind of sat off on the sidelines. But Redfield won't say when he last spoke to the president. The others had no problem admitting, 2.5 weeks, which isn't good. I mean, Redfield's got to then be much longer than that. Now, remember, the coronavirus task force, which the vice president always used to make sure to point out did everything, quote unquote, at the direction of the president, the coronavirus task force, which is now, as I said, as invisible as the virus itself, the task force still recommends mask wearing, more testing for the disease, social distancing, staying away from enclosed spaces and big crowds. You see them testifying? They had the masks on. Sometimes they took them off just to speak, then they put them right back on. But the president is doing everything he can to subvert all those people you just saw, the nation's top scientists. He shut down the daily briefings after being ridiculed for suggesting experimenting on injecting people with disinfectant. So he shuts the briefings down so Americans won't hear as much about the virus. Because the president believes if you don't hear about it as much, you'll forget about it. And about the federal government's incompetent response. So just forget, you'll move on, it seems so old. And sure, your dad may die, your grandmother might get sick, or she might die, you might get sick. You might die, but so be it. The president is actively working to turn people against all the other recommendations of the task force he once claimed to lead. Wearing masks, social distancing, not congregating in giant indoor stadiums with thousands of others or mega churches. Of course, behind the scenes, the president has gotten more tests for the virus than probably anyone else in this country, if not in the world.
Affairs programming on television, online, or listen on our...
Publicly, he's pretending this virus is past. Privately, he is living in a biological bunker. He visited the underground bunker. He was taken there one Friday, rushed there by the Secret Service. He denies that, but he lives every day in a biological bunker. People being tested around him, everyone's wearing masks, having their temperature checked. He is as sanitized and protected from the virus as anyone can be, and in the midst of that epicenter of sanitation, he is encouraging everyone else, don't follow the guidelines. Publicly, he is flouting all of those guidelines, except the one about hand washing. He is washing his hands of all of it. Worse than that, worse even than modeling bad behavior, he's been creating a string of distractions that are taking up precious bandwidth that have nothing to do with slowing down the virus and saving lives. Oh, and he's been boasting, of course, that he ordered a slowdown in testing.
So I said to my people, slow the testing down, please. They test and they test. We got tests that people don't know what's going on. We got tests. We got another one over here.
He said that on Saturday. Yesterday, his spokesperson said, look, he was only joking, of course.
It was a comment that he made in jest. It's a comment that he made in passing, specifically with regard to the media coverage and pointing out the fact that the media never acknowledges that we have more cases because when you test more people, you find more cases.
Is it appropriate to joke about coronavirus when 120,000 people have died?
He was not joking about coronavirus.
Ms. McEnany is now learning, like all spokespeople for this president, that when you go out on a limb for DJT, they'll cut the limb off behind you. Does it every time. Shortly after McEnany said that, the president suggested that no, he wasn't joking, speaking to a local reporter, and he made it completely clear to a CBS News correspondent today.
Mr. President, at that rally when you said you asked your people to slow down testing, were you just kidding or do you have a plan to slow down testing?
I don't kid. Let me just tell you, let me make it clear. We have got the greatest testing program anywhere in the world. We test better than anybody in the world. Our tests are the best in the world, and we have the most of them.
It's okay. He says he wasn't joking. Never mind what his spokesperson said. Wasn't joking when he said that he asked to slow the testing. Now, of course, task force members were asked about this claim today, and they said they didn't know anything about it.
To my knowledge, none of us have ever been told to slow down on testing. That just is a fact. In fact, we will be doing more testing.
As Dr. Fauci said, all of us have been and continue to be committed to increasing readily, timely access to testing. We've made a marked improvement.
Let me go straight to the question that my colleague asked. I'll just ask each of you for a yes or no answer. Has President Trump ever directed you to slow down testing for COVID-19 in the United States? Dr. Redfield?
No.
No, sir.
No, Congressman.
Dr. Redfield seems unfamiliar with the mask there. I don't know. So maybe he said it to someone else. He does, after all, tend to repeat himself somewhat frequently. Or maybe he never said it, but just made it up. And now he's sticking by the lie because that he thinks it makes him look tough. And they loved it. So
about this, right, is that in some ways the federal government exists to regularize this. The CDC exists as this vaunted institution respected around the world to come in and help states think this through. And there's this kind of like memento-like quality of just watching people unlearn the lessons. I mean, when I look at the Arizona hospitalization numbers, I think to myself, I've been covering this story from February, like, I know what this looks like. I've seen it now. I've seen what it does. We know what it does. Like, how are we having to relearn this again in June?
I've been talking with administration officials and experts on the outside. This feels like deja vu. It feels like, with the numbers rising and the White House largely playing it down, somewhat of a reprise of where we were and where the rest of the world was. But the difference is Italy, Spain got walloped. They got better. The daily numbers in terms of cases in Italy are down now in the low hundreds. The cases in the United States, now granted, we are a bigger country, but even adjusted for population, 25,000, 30,000, if you map it out against Italy, our case count right now is roughly on par with Italy's worst day. And that's why Italy has now moved forward and can reopen more safely. Here in the United States, I'm still worried. There's a reason I haven't gotten my hair cut. If I was in Naples, Italy, I might feel safer than I was in Naples, Florida right now. And that's actually a question I asked most experts. Where would you want to be in the coming weeks? And nearly to a person, they said rather be in Italy than the United States.
It's really...
Apartments, Orthodox Jews, gun owners, Fox News, NASCAR fans, traditional Christianity. That's not a random assortment of institutions. It's the people standing in their way. There's a reason that Black Lives Matter leader Shaun King yesterday called for the desecration of churches. That'll bring those Christians to heel. None of this should surprise us. We should have seen it coming. It was obvious. We've known for 50 years that much of the poison in our society emanates from the universities. But we've done nothing whatsoever to fix that. We've continued to fund them, no matter what they charge. We keep sending our children there. We've known for more than 3 years that the federal government's intelligence and law enforcement agencies are dangerously corrupt. They act as armed enforcers for the Democratic Party. That's why Roger Stone is going to prison. They no longer even try to hide this or their partisan affiliation. Just today, a group of dozens of former national security officials announced they will be campaigning for Joe Biden this fall. And yet, once again, in the face of mountains of evidence, we've done nothing about it.
Version of this somewhat obscure refers to the sequel to the movie Breakin' 2, Electric Boogaloo. It's a reference, a sort of tongue-in-cheek reference that people use online to a second civil war. Basically, what it is referring to is we had one civil war, and these are people that are thinking about planning for, want to bring on the second one. In this case, in California, you had someone who tied to this group who it appears or is accused of shooting 2 police officers.
Yeah, so Steve Carrillo in Santa Cruz, California, he allegedly, according to investigators, he used with an accomplice the Oakland Black Lives Matter protest and admitted to this in a Facebook group where these groups proliferate online, admitted that they were using that as a way to, cloak their violence. And so he went and he shot and killed a federal officer in Oakland, then went on the run, and while he was on the run, he shot and killed a Santa Cruz sheriff deputy. And before he was captured, started writing Boogaloo memes on his car. So again, we're just seeing this play out in real life, and it seems to us only inevitable that the next thing is going to occur.
You've tracked this both sort of in real life and online, and I think there's some question about what the role of different platforms, what role they should play in this sort of thing. What do you see as the sort of situation now in terms of particularly Facebook and others in hosting activity for these kinds of groups?
I talked to someone on the Homeland Security Advisory Council in March, and he said to me, when we have groups of heavily armed people loudly talking about their plans for insurrection and to kill law enforcement officials, we should probably listen to them. It seems that we haven't. And Facebook right now continues to host Boogaloo groups who are getting around their very, just the basic level of content moderation they're doing for these groups. Right now they're existing on Reddit, they're even siphoning off to smaller, more private forums that we're seeing like Discord. I mean, the long and short of it is that these groups continue to exist even after all this violence. So in terms of what the platform, their role in it, their responsibility, it seems they're taking very, very little.
It's striking too, I mean, the sort of role of both sort of Second Amendment fetishization.
Today, Fox News alert, it's about to get very dusty. A plume of airborne desert sand is floating across the Atlantic from North Africa. It's about to arrive here. How will your city or state fare? Fox meteorologist Adam Klotz is tracking the dust storm for us and joins us tonight. Adam, what are we in for?
Hey there, Tucker. It's not as scary as it sounds. This isn't the end of the world. It's not the next thing kind of lined up in 2020, even though it does feel like that a little bit. Here's the folks we're going to be talking about seeing this particular system. Every year we get this big, strong wind stretching from Africa, sweeping across the Atlantic Ocean, over the Caribbean, through the Gulf of Mexico. This year may be a little bit stronger than typical years, but you're seeing that dust plume. It's going to lift up into the desert southeast. It's going to raise up in the southern portions of the Midwest.
Troubling that Brooks was killed in a city that's home, as she described it, to civil and human rights, the Black Mecca, she called it. He leaves a widow, 3 young daughters, and a 13-year-old stepson. The officer who killed him is in jail, charged with felony murder. The other officer involved has been charged with aggravated assault. The news continues. I want to hand things over to Chris for Cuomo Prime Time. Chris?
All right, thank you, Anderson, and thank you for helping us remember the right things the right way. I am Chris Cuomo. Welcome to Prime Time. Look, we have to be on the same page about reality. The pandemic will be with us for a while, period. Every place that ignores that reality and the recommended masks and measures will suffer. We see it time and again. We have to hear and accept this and act on it, because you and I, we are the key. You have to take care of yourself, and by doing that, I thank you, because it helps protect me and my family. Forget Trump. He does not want what the rest of us must want right now with this pandemic. Believe who he has shown you he is for the umpteenth time. Of course he lies about testing and invites people to gather at their own peril. He values praise over your protection. Even in Arizona, where cases are popping, he didn't even talk about it. Look, of course Trump continues to call COVID-19 the Kung flu. He is a demagogue who plays to bigotry. He wants you to blame the Chinese and see them as an other. That's what and who he is. Take it from someone who's known him most of my adult life. That's who he's always been. If any of you want this country to come close to its promise, forget about me needing to call out the obvious. You must reject the bigotry. You must demand that get this poison of us versus them out of his mendacity-ridden maw.
Statue of Andrew Jackson, in addition to the exterior defacing of St. John's Church across the street, 10 years in prison under the Veterans Memorial Preservation Act. Beware. Back out here in Washington, by the way, that statute that the president is citing subjects anyone who willfully injures, destroys, or attempts to injure, destroy any structure, plaque, statue, or other monument on public property commemorating the service of any person or persons in the armed forces. That's 10 years of imprisonment if they do that, and they're going to start enforcing that, in fact, today. As I show you these pictures, as you see, there is a large contingent of D.C. Metropolitan Police here protecting the street that leads right to Lafayette Park. We're about a block away, also from St. John's Church. And we've seen some of the protesters actually begin to march away. Sean, we'll be here for the hour. If you need us, we'll be here for you. But for now, back to you.
All right, Kevin, great coverage as always. We'll be checking back in throughout the hour. We now turn to Seattle's CHOPS, Chaz, Summer of Love, Festive Zone, which just experienced yet another shooting nearby this morning. Dan Springer, he has a live report with us tonight. Dan, another tragic shooting. We predicted this is not exactly the Summer of Love, and the mayor again saying some bizarre things today.
Yeah, and Sean, if you're keeping score at home, that's 4 shootings in the last 4 days, or 4 people shot, and 1 was deadly. That was one on early Saturday morning. And so because of that, we're seeing a change out here. Yesterday, Mayor Jenny Durkin announced that this cannot go on forever, and she wants to have these people voluntarily leave. And we have seen fewer numbers in there today. And we also saw a strategy meeting, if you will, with about 100 people on the turf football and baseball field. And it was very apparent that there's not a tight leadership here. There's not even, it's not even easy to identify the leadership. One by one, people would get up there and talk about what to do next. The first guy got out there and he said, well, let's pick up CHOP and move it to another part of the city. He was run out of there. Then there was another guy, and he said, you know, we got to do something about the gang violence, because that's probably what's causing these shootings in the area. And he was run out of there. And then somebody else got up and said, well, you know, we're going to sit in front of that police precinct. They're not going to be able to get us out of here legally, and they have to basically take us out with force. And once that happens, we'll be on national news and we'll get what we want. So there's really no leadership out here. We are seeing the numbers going down every day. And I think the Seattle Police Department's plan is just to let these numbers go down, and then they'll eventually try to take that precinct back. It was 2 weeks ago in a day that the police left that East Precinct behind me, and I expect they'll probably be back in that precinct within a week. Sure.
And because of the way COVID is, they're not allowed to see their family even if they are hospitalized. So it can be weeks before they see their family, or it can be the last time that they see their family.
So I get asked by my friends and family, how's work? And I never really know how to answer. Working as a respiratory therapist during this time, it's been difficult. And I know one of the things that I've really been struggling with and processing is how quickly a lot of these patients deteriorate, how they go from walking and talking to being intubated to being pronounced dead within a matter of hours, and knowing that there's no family members around for them to say goodbye. It's rough. It's very rough.
Good morning. My name is Judy Cruz. I'm the director from El Centro Regional Medical Center's ER. Today has been one of the worst days by far. All of our beds are full. There are 12 patients waiting for admission to ICU, which we have no beds, so that means we're pending transfer. We have to look for beds in another hospital. This is very taxing, time-consuming. Some of these patients have been here 2 to 3 days waiting for beds. Half of them are intubated on ventilators. One of them required CPR for the first 3 hours of our shift. That means 4 nurses, a respiratory therapist, a physician in that room the entire 3 hours. And unfortunately, he lost his battle to coronavirus. When I walk out of this office, I'm gonna go out there and tell the staff what an amazing job they're doing and have been doing, and how proud I am of them. But just know that we're all praying that this comes to an end soon. And we just want to go back to normal.
We just want it to go back to normal. That's the medical director of the ER at El Centro Medical Center in El Centro, California, which is, again, is the county seat of Imperial County. You also saw nurses and respiratory therapists who work there at El Centro. That hospital is in Southern California. It's basically an hour due west of where the president visited today for his event, hyping the idea of his border wall. In the state of California, they hit a new record number of cases on Sunday this weekend, more than 4,500 new cases reported in one day. Then the next day, Monday, yesterday, they broke that record and they got over 5,000 new cases in a day. Then today, California broke that record and got more than 6,000 new cases in a day. Things are going poorly in California. And that's a snapshot that we just saw of how things are at one already incredibly hard-hit hospital in the southern part of the state. The state of Texas also broke the 5,000 cases a day barrier within the last day. Texas statewide numbers are terrible right now. Before the new record for new cases was formally announced by the state today, Governor Greg Abbott did a round of press interviews about the fact that the state was about to hit this new 5,000 cases a day benchmark. Governor Abbott still trying to smooth things over, calm people down, alleviate any concerns about how bad things are in his state. Until recently, he was still claiming that the state had plenty of hospital capacity, and besides, the numbers only looked so bad because of increased testing. He's been echoing the president on that point, but it's just not at all true for Texas. Testing doesn't put you in the hospital, Governor. And Texas hospitalizations have doubled since Memorial Day. They've just had 12 straight days of record hospitalizations in Texas. In Houston, they've doubled their case numbers since just last week. Houston Chronicle today is out with an editorial blasting Governor Abbott for his, quote, foolish and short-sighted leadership in downplaying the impact of the virus. Harris County, where Houston is, says they will exhaust their available ICU beds within 11 days. There's 5 million people in Harris County. They've got 134 ICU beds left as of today, and case numbers doubling week to week. Late last night, the Texas Children's Hospital announced that it will open its doors to adult patients in and around Houston to try to alleviate some of the strain. The Children's Hospital is going to start taking adult patients as of last night. In Utah, the state health department is also raising alarms that Utah hospital capacity is on track to be overtopped in as soon as 4 weeks.
Democratic politicians, as we went over in great detail last night, we won't reiterate tonight, but to sum up, have failed their cities for decades. Their education system in ruins. Violent crime has been out of control for decades. They don't solve or fix any problem. Safety, security for every American should be a protected right. And in the past few weeks, a wave of looting, arson, vandalism, precinct burning, precincts taken over, and wrecked city centers. So what is the Democratic presumptive nominee's plan to restore order in America's liberal cities as we begin our opening monologue tonight? After all, we do have another candidate. It is 133 days till you, we, the American people, that you will have the ultimate decision. You'll be the ultimate jury. Well, the ever weak, forgetful Joe Biden has been in public life for over 50 years. So in 5 decades, he must have come up with a plan. He must have done things right. Well, the mob and the media will never tell you. We might never know, by the way, because, well, weak Joe Biden, the forgetful one, has not held a press conference in 82 days. The media mob, of course, aiding and abetting and protecting fragile Joe, just like they did Hillary in 2016. That's right, after 82 days, Joe has been mostly hiding in his basement bunker. But that, by the way, that pleases Terry McAuliffe. I'm fine with him in the basement. He only sees 2 people a day, 2 body people. He's going to run for president. We're going to vote in 133 days. Pretty much he's all but shut off from the outside world, not weighing in on the big issues of the day. Instead of taking any questions from reporters, he conducts what are these pre-scripted and frankly pathetic podcasts, which he somehow manages to even botch over again and again and again and again. No outrage from the media mob. He gets a pass.
Available at T-Mobile.com. At T-Mobile, we know that ulcerative colitis under control.
They're taking off. 2 weeks ago, Arizona started to hit 1,000 new cases a day. 6 days ago, they shifted gears up to 2,000 new cases a day. Now, in 3 of the last 5 days, they're up over 3,000 new cases a day, including more than 3,500 new cases just specifically today. And this is coming at a time when people in Arizona are waiting 5, 6, 10, 12, 13 hours to get a test. Even people with symptoms. Because the state is so consistently terrible. They're 40th in the nation in terms of access to testing. And still, with that little testing available in Arizona, their numbers are still this bad. We're going to have a live report in just a moment from a frontline doctor in Phoenix, an emergency room doctor in Phoenix, to talk about why the last thing that community needs right now is an indoor event tonight with 3,000 people packed in like sardines and almost nobody wearing masks. I mean, just think about this for a second, right? I mean, how does this look to other countries, for example? I mean, for all the, failure of the president's way smaller than expected rally in Tulsa, Oklahoma this weekend, I know he's gotten a lot of grief and he's been very embarrassed about how small that crowd was with 2/3 of the arena sitting empty. But think about it this way. Even for that sad sack of a bad turnout rally in Tulsa, the White House, the president still did manage to get 6,000 people into that indoor space in Tulsa for that event. 6,000 people. And then tonight, he crammed another 3,000 people inside for another campaign event. And however positive or negative or exciting or embarrassing these political events have been for the president, these are still the only indoor events in the country in months in which thousands of people have congregated inside the same space. I mean, think about that. How do we explain that? In terms of our responsibility as a country in the midst of a global worldwide pandemic where countries, even when they isolate themselves from one another, are still interlinked, where any country where this thing is out of control is a risk to every place else on earth. I mean, how do we explain that? I mean, it's one thing to think about, countries where, whatever the ruler says, people are going to do their own thing. But in this case, think about what the ruler is doing, right? Think about what the occupant of the White House has arranged here. The largest indoor congregate events of the entire coronavirus era, the only mass indoor events being held for any reason anywhere, are being held in the United States to celebrate the president's re-election effort. Because that's the one priority thing we need to do as a country. I mean, if we're going to get thousands of people together in places with out-of-control epidemics and overtopped hospitals already, let it be so we can chant "lock her up" or whatever and hear stories from the president about how good he is walking down ramps and how President Obama is a secret Kenyan who should be arrested for treason or whatever. That's the reason we need to start putting thousands of people indoors in the same space with no masks again. This isn't happening anywhere in any industrialized country. It certainly isn't happening anywhere else in the country that has the worst epidemic and the highest death rate on earth. That's us. But this is what the White House is doing. I mean, it's like this stuff is happening on another planet where a failure to deal with this totally foreseen, preventable public health disaster didn't just kill 121,000 Americans in 16 weeks. Here's the government's top infectious disease doctor, Dr. Anthony Fauci, testifying today in Congress.
We're now seeing a disturbing surge of infections. One of the things is an increase in community spread. And that's something that I'm really quite concerned about. We were going down from 30,000 to 25 to 20, and now we sort of stayed about flat, and now we're going up. A couple of days ago, there were 30,000 new infections. That's very troublesome to me.
We're starting to pretty regularly have 30,000 new infections. Our 7-day average right now in terms of new cases is over 30,000 new cases a day. Dr. Fauci says that's very troublesome to me. It's also very troublesome to the rest of the world, even though it's apparently not to the president of our country, who again tonight decided to pack 3,000 people into a single room in a state where the virus is spreading out of control. 1,000, then 2,000, then 3,000, now 3,500 new cases a day. He's like, 3,500 new cases a day. How many do you think we can get out of this room tonight if we put 3,000 people in here for hours?
Ukraine. Because with China, he got a sweetheart $1.5 billion deal with the actual Bank of China, and we don't see any experience in his background at all that would have warranted such a deal. But it happened shortly after he stepped off your Air Force Two airplane in Beijing when you went to visit Asia and China, when you were the vice president. Another question Joe may want to ask is, will you ask your son to give up the shares and the investment of that $1.5 billion deal with China? Or maybe give back the money from Burisma Holdings that he admits he had zero experience in and got paid anyway? I don't know. I have no idea. Any experience? No, none whatsoever. Anyway, that's a lot of millions of dollars, Joe, and you did threaten to fire that prosecutor. I'd like to know your answer. Why did you leverage a quid and a pro and a quo $1 billion taxpayer dollars? We also know that Biden initially bashed President Trump's China travel ban. Remember, that went into effect 10 days after the first identified confirmed case of coronavirus in the U.S. Well, Joe, you called it hysterical, xenophobic, and fear-mongering. Okay, Joe, what would you have done differently? Because 2 months and 3 days later, you said you did now support the travel ban. By that time, it was way too late. We can go on and on. Let's end with one more important question. Here's a question we need to ask ourselves as a country in 133 days. Does the ever-frail, forgetful, 78-year-old, confused and confounded Joe Biden, does he have the strength? Does he have the stamina? Does he have the alertness, the mental acuity to perform the...
It's a no-brainer. The more we wear masks, the safer we are. And that's one of the things we can do to fight this virus so we can get our economy back and save lives.
The idea of how effective a prophylactic it is, when you look at it as compared to a seatbelt or a helmet, if you're going to be on a motorcycle, do you see it as a similar level of effectiveness?
Little different, because when I wear a mask, I'm protecting you. When you wear a mask, you're protecting me. And when all of us wear a mask, all of us are safer. So this is about getting together to block the virus. This is about protecting our community. And even if you're young and healthy, you think you'll do fine with this virus, you could get it, not know you have it, spread it to someone who dies from it. A little girl with leukemia, your sister-in-law who's on treatment for breast cancer, someone who's older who will die. This is a deadly virus for some people. It's mild for others. But for us as a society, it can be devastating.
Dr.